talking about the future and certainly predicting the future, which is what I do. A lot of the time is around, I guess, tracking the trends, what's coming next, what's it going to mean for us, regardless of the industry we're in. It's a pretty perilous thing to do. And Stephen pointed out, of course, with some interesting predictions from Stephen Keen. I loved how you'd said, all due respect, indicating you have almost none for Stephen Keen. So I want to show you some other predictions from people far smarter than me who managed to get it just a tiny bit wrong in years past. Check this one out from Lord Kelvin. X-rays, he said, well, one day we'll figure out, have always been a hoax. Now, Lord Kelvin was no idiot. If you know this man, he was the one who figured out how to measure temperature by degrees, the way we still measure it today. He was the one who was formulating the first and second laws of thermodynamics, and yet still got it just a little bit wrong when it came to predicting the future. What about one of the retail giants of the mid-50s in the US, who predicted within a decade we'd all be using nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners in our homes? What about one of our modern retail giants, Aussie icon, of course, Gerry Harvey, who in 2004 said that online retailing is going to be a fad, it will not last, won't affect my business. Interesting to reflect on that prediction about the future in the very week that we've seen Amazon acquire their first property on Australian soil. Now, what about this prediction here? This is probably the most staggering one of the last few years. The former CEO of Cisco, John Chambers, said this: in 10 years' time, 40% of businesses today will not exist. Now that seems like a pretty staggering prediction, but can I suggest to you, as someone who lives and breathes this stuff, there is every chance he's going to be spot on. Okay, case in point, check this out. 2006, these were the 5 largest companies on the globe based on market capitalization. We had 2 energy stocks in Exxon and Total. We had GE, we had Microsoft as a legacy software provider, and Citigroup. Now you fast forward 5 years from this point, we've had the GFC, the credit crunch, the Great Recession, whatever you want to call it, and this is what the top 5 list looked like. We now had 3 energy stocks in the top 5. We had Apple in position number 2, we had a Chinese bank in slot number 5, Microsoft nowhere to be seen. Now this is interesting, you fast forward another 5 years to last year, 2016, this is what the list looked like. Now you'll notice here that all the technology stocks are shaded in green, and that is significant. If you're not aware, Alphabet is Google's parent company. Now, how do these brands get here? They got here by disrupting the business models, the revenue structures of a whole pile of other businesses and industries along the way. In fact, some of the ones they disrupted no longer exist, while these ones have risen to the top. And hey, while it's interesting looking retrospectively at how disruption has played out, the far more compelling story is this: what is coming next? What are the disruptions going to impact every single one of us in the years to come? And that's the place that I play the most. In fact, the last 5 or 6 years, one of the perks of this role, being on the speaker circuit, is you get to meet some fascinating people. I mean, I spend my life talking with, interviewing some of the people who aren't just studying the future, they're the ones making it. They're developing the apps. These are the business thinkers who are at the forefront. And when you have conversations in green rooms backstage, you get just a glimpse of what the future's going to be like. And it's an extraordinary time to be alive. There is a whole lot of change. Some of it's going to be really great. Some of it is going to be truly terrifying for some businesses. I mean, it can either be an opportunity or a threat depending on the lens you look at it through. Now, one interesting interaction I had a few weeks ago was in Singapore, speaking at a conference there. The other keynote speaker was a guy who I've looked up to for years from afar, a guy named Gary Hamel. If you're familiar with Gary Hamel's work, he's one of the leading thinkers on driving innovation culture. This is a man who turned around Adidas's business in the US, who turned around Whirlpool's business a few years ago. And here's something Gary Hamel shared backstage. He said, companies, he said, fail to create the future, not because they can't predict it, but because they can't imagine it. So you're trying to get your head around what's coming next. And I want to spend a few moments doing that this morning. What is coming next? And we could look at a whole raft of disruptions that are on the way. We could look at nanotechnology, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, robotics, the list goes on. But what I want to look at very briefly this morning is one that I'm guessing every single one of you have read about, you've heard about, you've probably got an opinion about. But I wonder if you've actually paused long enough to consider how significantly this one disruption is going to change the game for a whole pile of industries, in fact, the very nature of society in the next few years. And that's the disruption related to these things here, driverless cars. Now, how many of you find the whole notion of driverless cars just the tiniest bit terrifying? Hands up if you do. Come on, be honest. A lot of us do. The interesting thing is these things are nowhere near as far off as most of us think. Okay, late last year, the head of Ford announced their goal is by the year 2021, have the first car roll off their production line that has no steering wheel. Just let that sink in. And while that's probably a terrifying notion for some of you, think about how disruptive these things are going to be to a whole range of industries over the next few years. I mean, for instance, you think of the automotive insurance industry. Now, I work with insurers, they're my clients. I want to tell you, they are already getting ready. They're gearing up for driverless technology and they're terrified of it. Because have a think about it. If you have an accident in a driverless vehicle, that's right, who's at fault? Who makes a claim on their insurance? The whole basis of that lucrative industry becomes something of a moot point the moment the person at the helm of the car is no longer in control of that vehicle. How you think about the paid parking industry. Imagine, for instance, you live locally to the event here this morning. Once you've got a driverless car, you wouldn't actually pay to park your car to be on site here today. Your car would drop you at the front here on Pitt Street. You wander in the doors, come up the escalators, and your car may well take home off and wait for you until you're finished and come back and pick you up. Batmobile style, right? Or what if you take it a step further? What if your driverless car dropped you in Pitt Street, and rather than going home, it went into a pool of other driverless cars, Uber style, earning you cash while you're sitting in here learning? Or, hey, you take it a step further than that. If, in 15 years' time, there's thousands of Uber-style cars that you can hail at the drop of a hat on your smartphone that are a fraction of the cost of what we pay now, why would you bother even owning a car in the first place? Now, that is the existential threat to the automakers right now. This is what's keeping car makers awake at night right now, I can tell you that, because the nervous thing is car ownership may well disappear in our lifetimes. In fact, I read a prediction recently, within 30 years, owning a car will be like owning a horse today. And you see how dangerous it is when brands don't recognize what's at the periphery. In 2008, the former head of Blockbuster said this: Netflix, they're not even on our radar when it comes to competition. You think about the naivety. You think about the arrogance to an extent. Certainly the short-sightedness behind that statement. That was the very downfall of that business. And see, while it's interesting to look at disruption and change and technology, what I'm always more interested in is this. How do we learn from businesses, brands, industries that, regardless of what has changed around them, have managed to stay at the cutting edge, have managed to stay in the game? And there's plenty of brands over the years that have done that. In fact, have a look at this little montage of brands on the screen behind me. Brands that are each, in their own situations, brands that have seen a lot of change. Many of these businesses are well over a century old. And when I'm working with clients, either in this sort of mode, sort of the keynote speaker mode, or if I'm a consulting mode or working with executive teams, my challenge is this: how do you extract the principles, the lessons from these brands and apply them in the context you're playing in? And in a couple of minutes we've got left, I want to look at that very question. So if you've got a pen and paper handy, grab it out, because I want to give you some stuff to take away and reflect on. How do these principles apply to you if you're going to be indisruptible in the years to come? And so the first key, if you're going to navigate change and stay in the game, first key is simply this: you need to foster healthy paranoia. Now the reality is, if you've had any success in business, you need to operate every moment of every day like you've got a target painted on your back, because you have. There is always a new player, a new tech startup, a new technology coming into view that has the express desire to take you out, or at least take market share. And the beauty of this healthy paranoia, operating like you've got a target on your back, is it's the best antidote for the two most dangerous dynamics for any business when you've had success. Those two dynamics: complacency and arrogance. Yossi said it, and it's so true, we have an ego, but businesses have an ego as well. And the old saying is true: the moment you think you've made it, you've passed it. And so the beauty of healthy paranoia is it keeps you on your A game. And in fact, it leads to the two key ingredients to staying relevant in times of change. Number one, it keeps you humble. And number two, it keeps you hungry. The two essential ingredients. Now, what I love about this whole mentality is you look at how this plays out in big businesses, and big businesses like Facebook, for instance. One of the mandates that Mark Zuckerberg gives to every new teammate who joins the Facebook team worldwide is this: if we don't create the thing that kills Facebook, someone else will. That That is the definition of healthy paranoia. The best antidote to complacency and arrogance. Number two, second key if you're going to stay relevant in the face of change is this. You need to think revolution, not evolution. You know, we often think about change and innovation as being an evolutionary process. We even invoke concepts of Darwinism and natural selection. And you know what? The reality is evolutionary change does have a role to play. But continuous improvement is not going to cut it in the years to come. We're going to get to a point where every industry, every business needs to fundamentally rethink the way they extract value, the way they offer value, the way they engage with their clients. I love the insight offered to us by a former head of business at San Francisco University, a guy named Oren Harari, who said this. He said, the electric light, remember, never came from the continuous improvement of candles. There was a point where revolution was required, not just a continual evolution along the same track we'd always known. All right, number three, third key to being indisruptible in the face of change is this. You need to dig the well before you get thirsty. Now, what I mean by that is you need to reinvent yourself before the change hits. Because if you wait until disruption arrives, you're going to find yourself in survival mode rather than strategic mode. You need to reinvent yourself before you've got no other choice. Now, many of you have probably heard this statement. In fact, it's a bit of a cliche these days. Albert Einstein famously said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get a different result. Who has heard that? Most of us have, I imagine. Can I put it to you? If Einstein were to define insanity today in light of all the disruption we're seeing across every industry, every sector, I reckon he would define insanity the very opposite way. I reckon today he'd say this: insanity today is actually doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get the same result. What I mean by that is this: if you are using the same techniques, the same approaches, the same technology you were using 5 years ago, expecting it to be as effective as it was 5 years ago, you're going to be sorely mistaken. The market has moved on. Our challenge is to at least keep pace. I love the insight from the former CEO of GE, Jack Welch, who said this: the moment the rate of change outside an organization exceeds the rate of change within it, the end is near. How true is that? And that's the challenge we face, all of us, myself included, all of us in this bucket. How do we identify what's changing and at least keep pace and ideally stay half a step ahead? Now, I guess in keeping with this whole theme of identifying what's changing, one of the things I've been looking forward to launching today is a report we've been working on for the last few months, and we're launching this in print form today. It's basically a report designed to look at that question of what's coming next. And we looked at a few disruptions today. We put a report together with the 20 trends, I want to put it to you, no business can ignore. You just can't. This is the stuff that's coming, whether we like it or not. So if that'd be useful, again, we're just launching this today in print form. There'll be some of these out, I think, where you got your name badges this morning. So feel free to grab one of these as a gift on the way out. But essentially identifying the stuff we've got to pay close attention to. If you'd rather get a digital version to be able to share with colleagues or friends, best way to do that, if you jump onto my website, so it's up there, michaelmcqueen.net, jump on there. There's a little button that says conference code, a little blue button. Click on that. And when you click on the conference code button, you just put your first name, the best email contact for you that you want us to send the report to. And this is the key thing, the word trends. That's the conference code to put in. So if you maybe want to take a photo of that to do it later on, feel free to do that. But if you jump on there, I'll send you a link so you can download that report to read through, and you've got a few moments to do so. Now, just as we draw all this together, we could talk a whole lot longer about the whole theme of disruption and change, but I wanted to leave you with one of my favorite quotes at the moment. What I love about this quote is that it's more relevant today than ever before, but it's actually a quote that's 2,600 years old. And it's a quote from the great Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who said this. He said, resisting change is like trying to hold your breath. Even if you are successful, it doesn't end well. How true is that? And this is the challenge we face. So thanks for having me. I hope that was useful. Enjoy. Cheers.